Vanguard rides again. So, I recently watched Green Lantern Beware My Power, a new DC animated movie. And in recent times, cape shit has been, there's not much for me in that genre anymore. I don't really find it as interesting as I once did. When I was a child, cape shit was my shit. I read a lot of comic books. I watched almost anything superhero related I could get my hands on. And part of that was because the time period that I was drawn to was the Silver Age, and there was so much boundless imagination and creativity in the Silver Age. Those were the first comics I started reading when I was a child, and then I started reading comics from the '80s, and they also had like boundless creativity, and they were just crazy and weird. And I read a few things from the '90s, and my journey with cape shit, it's when I finally got into modern comic books, like when I joined Modern Times, I stepped out of the ice chamber and came to the present. I found modern comics in the early 2000s, they didn't appeal to me as much. Like, I would read them and they would be kind of okay, but they just always felt flat and empty. Like, they just weren't really my thing. Some modern comics I read would be interesting, but a lot of the time, I think I found them boring. Like, I feel like I like the Ultimate line. Like, I remember there were a lot of things in the Ultimate Marvel that I thought were kind of cool. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man still remains one of the greatest runs on the superhero ever. But a lot of modern things I thought were pretty terrible. Not even terrible. That's not even the word for it. Just boring. So, I saw that there was a new Green Lantern movie coming out, and Green Lantern has one of the richest lore in all the DC universe. So I thought to myself, okay, this new DC animated universe has appealed to me a little bit more than the previous one. The previous one and its new 52 aesthetic wasn't really my thing. Wasn't my cup of tea. The few movies I liked Reign of the Superman, the first part, and I did like that Apocalypse War movie they released. That was pretty cool too. And I mean, Justice League Origin or Justice League War, their adaptation of Justice League Origin, that wasn't too bad either. But a lot of the movies in between I did not really enjoy. Hold on. So, I checked out Green Lantern Beware My Power. And I have to say, I was disappointed, but not surprised. It does a lot of the things typical of superhero or cape shit in modern times. So, before I get into the spoilery stuff, I guess I'll start with the gripes that I had in general. The first thing that was very bizarre about it is this trend of getting actors who are recognizable to voice characters needs to stop. Like, I don't know if Aldous Hodge has done voice acting before. He's a decent actor. Well, he's okay. Like, he's not amazing. He's one of those actors where he just looks nice and he has like a nice demeanor. But in everything I've seen him in, he's decent. Okay. But he's not the best voice actor. Like, his voice work here wasn't that good, and it left something to be, inspired. And I don't think the voice work in any of the DC movies so far has been that stellar. Like, they've all been lacking in some way, and I think it's because they keep following this trend of getting recognizable actors. Like, one of the actors who played Superman, he was a guy from Glee, and I guess they were banking on that, too. But if the actor doesn't have any voice acting credits, or at least not a good repertoire of voice acting credits, I do not think they should be voicing characters, because voice acting is in itself a whole nother ball game. It's almost completely separate from normal acting. So, yeah, that was one of my first gripes, that Aldous Hodge, his take on Jon Stewart wasn't really my cup of tea. Additionally, the movie does this weird thing where it like skips. It's like, so it seems to take place in the new DC animated universe, but there's a bunch of shit here, like that like. I mean, this is kind of spoilery, but not really. The Justice League exists in this universe, in this movie, and so does their Watchtower. But when did they come about? Like, when did the Justice League come together? And, like, are we ever going to get to see this adventure of how they came together? And, I don't know. And beyond that, the movie plods on very, like, the pacing in this film is not very good. It just plods on and on and on. And as I was watching it, I felt like I was nodding off. I actually had to watch it in 2 parts. I was getting really tired when I first watched it, so I turned it off and fell asleep. Then I finished it later. And it's not a very well-structured film. The voice acting in it is not that good. And like I said, it just skips past a bunch of lore and just kind of presents you with shit. It's like, hey, I know this universe is just starting, but we're going to carry on as if it's existed for 5 years now. And here's all this shit. And it's like, okay. So now past all that stuff, right? The voice acting and the terrible pacing and the weird sort of approach to the DC universe this film took. We're going to get to the spoiler parts now. Now, if you don't want to watch any spoilers, if you want to watch it for yourself and not be spoiled, go ahead and leave, but I do not recommend this movie, so you might as well just sit here and listen to me. Basically, they took the story, I don't know who made them want to adapt this story, one of the most hated Green Lantern eras ever, or stories ever, and it almost stained the character of Kyle Rayner forever, even though he's a pretty likable and well-liked character, is Emerald Knight. So basically the Green Lantern Corps is like destroyed and Hal Jordan becomes evil, and Hal Jordan became evil before that, and the Green Lantern Corps was destroyed, and he had all these rings, and you've probably seen the picture of him with his hands like this and all the rings on his fingers, and he tried to like remake the universe and then he was killed, right? So they replaced him with Kyle Rayner, and Kyle Rayner is a character who could have been great if introduced on his own, and people probably would have loved him. But they tried to introduce him to replace Hal Jordan, and it did not really work out that well. It's like you don't have to destroy and stain another character to introduce a new one. But that's exactly what they did here. They took the story, right? First of all, they replaced Kyle Rayner with Jon Stewart. He kind of takes the place of Kyle Rayner here. Literally the same thing that happens in that comic happens in the movie, where a Guardian crash lands and gives him the ring. Except in the Kyle Rayner story, it's kind of hinted, sort of, although it's kind of retconned later. It's kind of hinted that the Guardian just chose him, just cause. He's like, oh, you'll have to do it. He gives him the last remaining Green Lantern ring. Well, here, this Guardian came searching for Jon Stewart. He's like, oh, Jon Stewart, I found you. And I was like, what the fuck? Why does a Guardian know who the hell Jon Stewart is? There's nothing special he seems to have done. We've seen like flashbacks from him, and he's just I guess he was a soldier. But I mean, all we see is that he has PTSD, and I'm just wondering what made this Guardian seek him out. And they never explain that, by the way. They never explain why this Guardian went searching for him specifically, just to give him the last remaining Green Lantern ring. And then later, so yeah, right? You got that. They stole the story of Emerald Knight, which is already one of the most hated Green Lantern stories ever. And they kind of have this really dismal presentation of the DC's cosmic universe, where everyone's dying and suffering, and Alan Strange appears, and he has this like scar on his face, and he's a unhappy drunk, and Shiera is like a murderous psychopath, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on with this shit? Like, what is this? And then we finally meet Hal Jordan. The whole movie we're told Hal Jordan's dead, just like in Emerald Knight, right? Okay, you know what? Before I get to that, let me talk about how we meet Hal Jordan. So we meet him in this, Sinestro Corps prison, and this is where things get weird. So the Sinestro Corps in this movie, I don't know what their deal is. Like, you couldn't see rings. None of them seemed to have any rings besides Sinestro, and they all had these weird, goofy weapons. And I don't know, man. There were no recognizable Sinestro Corps members, like any of the popular ones, like, no Arquillo or anything. It was just a bunch of random people. There was Kanjar Ro and Despero for some reason, except this version of Despero is just, he's like this silent guy with slight mind control powers. They don't really explain if it's mind control or telekinesis that he has. I don't know, man. And I mean, there was this really hot alien babe who kind of seemed like she had, I don't know, she could make constructs, but she was doing telekinetic shit. It was very confusing what their deal was. Like, if they had rings, if they could make constructs or what, I don't know. They seemed to just be a bunch of random people with yellow light powered weapons. And some of them didn't even seem to have any weapons at all. Like, one of them was just a shapeshifter, and that's it. So we meet Hal in this prison, and the rest of the movie, Hal's helping them. Then we learn, surprise, Hal's evil, and it's the Emerald Knight thing, and the way he became evil is the stupidest shit ever. So all the Green Lanterns are dead. We see how they were killed. And it turns out Sinestro went to fucking Oa by himself with Hal, and for some reason he brought Hal with him, and, you know, first he infects Hal with the Parallax virus. And then, you know, Sinestro is able to take out the entire Green Lantern Corps by himself. I don't know what to make of this film at this point. When I saw that, I was like, Jesus Christ, okay. And then, you know, Hal takes the rings, and he does the thing with all the rings on his fingers, and yeah, he's evil. So keep in mind, this is the first time we're meeting Hal Jordan. It turns out he's an evil psychopath. You know, John is forced to fight him, and then John just starts whooping his ass for some reason. There's no explanation as to why. Hal is much better trained than him, and on top of that, he has all these Green Lantern rings, and he seems to be really powerful, but, you know, John starts whooping his ass. Oh, and before that, actually, they kill Sinestro. John kills Sinestro. Yes, you heard me right. They took one of the most popular Green Lantern villains ever, and they killed him in his first debut. Yeah, okay. Anyways, so Hal is killed by Green Arrow, and yeah, that he's killed, and, you know, and there's a weird part where it's like everyone in this movie is like a weird psychopath, because Sardath, a popular Adam Strange character, they treat Zeta beams. Zeta beams are just teleportation. Think of them as boom tubes. Everyone knows about boom tubes because of recent DC fare, but they're like these teleportation lines that exist. Sometimes they're natural. You know, we'll just say they're natural for sake of the simplicity, and in the movie they're presented that way too. And apparently Sardath just can use them as like a weapon of mass destruction. They're never really clear. Like, you don't know if they're a disintegrator beam, but no, they're a teleporter. But then they kind of talk about it as if it's a disintegrator beam. They run from it as if it's a disintegrator beam, and yeah. So there's that. But yeah, they take Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern. He is the Green Lantern. They try to give him praise at first. He's standing there and it's like, he's the greatest Green Lantern in the universe. And then they proceed to make him evil. There's really no explanation as to why he's evil. He's just like, I could make the universe better if I wasn't weak. And yeah, he wants to remake the universe with Zeta beams because that makes sense, I guess. Whatever. So, you know, Hal... everything about this movie is terrible. You know, the voice acting isn't that good. The plot plods along very boringly. Everything in the movie is dismal. You have all this lore, DC cosmic lore that you could use, and instead we just see a bunch of people getting killed and exploded. And you know, it's just you take first of all, you take one character story and give it to Jon Stewart, and then you have Jon Stewart replace Hal Jordan. But you can't. It's not even just a normal passing off the torch. Like, that could have been interesting. A movie where Hal Jordan is training Jon Stewart and passes off the torch to Jon Stewart. That could have been cool. Maybe he's like, oh, you stay here in this sector. I'm like a universal Green Lantern now or some shit. And Jon stays on Earth. That would be perfect. That would explain everything. But no, they had to disgrace him and have Jon Stewart replace him because he's the let's say, the politically appropriate take on a Green Lantern now. But it's like this trend of disgracing popular white characters, white straight characters, and then replacing them with, we'll say, spicy equivalents is kind of weird. It's been happening for a long time, so it's not surprising in the least. But it's just, you would think that they would realize that this doesn't work, but they still haven't. So Green Lantern Beware My Power is an absolute snooze fest and a terrible movie. It's not worth your watch. You know what, I don't even want to call it terrible, because it wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's just not very good. It's mediocre, and then on top of being mediocre, it's boring. So don't waste your time. Like and subscribe to the video. I have a podcast. Check that out too. And Vanguard out.